Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to a video about favorite books. I've made one with the favorite female authors, and I thought I'm gonna do a series, and then I forgot about it. You know how it goes. But then I watched a couple of videos going around about a month ago where my 10 favorite novels of all time or something, and I always have difficulties, real difficulty to choose, because some books are important, and then that means they are my favorite in that sense. But some books just mean something to me personally, even though I know that they are not the absolute masterpiece, But then I also watched a video on Steve's channel. I will leave a link to that video down below about the books that I reread the most. And I kind of sort of thought, well, I'm combining these two ideas of my favorite books of all time and just look at the books from, I would say, the last 10 years that I reread the most, and I picked 5 of those. So that's the books you get. And maybe I will, now that I've restarted this series about the favorite books, maybe I will do, because you gave me all great suggestions about favorites that I could talk about. So anyway, but these are kind of not really officially, but sort of my most favorite books. And my criterion was that those are the books over the last 10 years that I reread the most. So the first one is probably not a surprise if you follow my channel, and that is Edith Wharton, The Age of Innocence, first published in 1920 or 1921. Was it 1921? 1920. About New York high society in the golden age, the 1870s. And we focus on 3 people in particular, kind of a love triangle, Newland Archer and his fiancée and later wife, May, and then the other woman, Ellen Olenska, who is kind of a social outcast because she is choosing her own life and she decided to leave her abusive husband. And Newland falls in love with her and Ellen falls in love with him, but it's not a happy ending story. Spoiler alert. This is one of the books that made me realize how beautifully written something can be. The story is really engaging and interesting. I also loved the movie, but why I'm rereading this book, which might be a topic for another video, why you reread at all, but why I'm rereading it is for the atmosphere, but also for the language, because it just makes me happy to read Edith Wharton's writing, her language. It's, for some reason, there are other writers who write beautifully, please, but for me, she works the best. And it just, when I reread sentences, and sometimes I'm just, opening it and then rereading a couple of pages because I love her way of writing so much. So that's why this is one of the books that I reread the most. The next one is translated fiction. And I knew the author when she was still alive, Dasha Drindic, a Croatian author. And this book has been translated, that's why I'm looking at my notes, translated from the Croatian by Ellen Elias Burzac. The book was published in 2007 in Croatian, and then in 2011 in the original, and maybe should show the book as well, Trieste. And this is not a book that I reread cover to cover. It's a book about the Holocaust. There's a main character, a woman. Her name always escapes me. Her name is Haya Tedeschi. Tedeschi, I think Tedeschi. And she is in her 60s and she's waiting for her son. As it says on the cover, an old woman's obsessive search for her son, who was fathered by an SS officer. And it's about the Holocaust, and it's set in Italy, not in Germany. There is one big extermination camp in Italy, and it is also featuring, names, lists with names. So it's not a book. It's a difficult book, certainly because of the topic, but it's such a masterpiece. Yeah, I'm not only quoting it, I'm agreeing with it. But what I do with this book, it is not cover to cover rereading, but I'm just thinking of certain scenes in the book or certain events on her with her search when she's waiting for her son, and then I'm rereading parts of it. But it's certainly one of the books that I pick up the most, and I put it on the stack to reread in its entirety again. So maybe I will, but yeah, this is, I read that first time just when it came out, so way before Goodreads, before I was a member of Goodreads. Yeah, I'm saying this because it's marked unread in Goodreads, because there's lots of books that I read before I joined Goodreads, and I've never really been able to catch up with everything. But if you want to read an absolute fantastic book about the horrors of World War II, and especially the murder of the Jews in the Holocaust, this is it. If you only read one about this topic, this is it. But not easy, telling you. The next one is also not a surprise if you follow my channel. It's an Ursula Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness, first published in, let me check, 1969. I read this book, I think, for the first time in my late teens, early 20s, I guess, but in the German translation. So that doesn't really count, but it's certainly a book that I'm going back to again and again and again. It is set on a winter world. Yes, winter is coming in Gethen. That's how I pronounce it. It's Gethen. And we follow two main characters. The one is Genli I, that's how I pronounce it, and Estraven. Genli I is an envoy from the, let's say, the UN, the future UN, and he is an observer on this planet. And Estraven is one of the high-ranking officials on the planet, and their relationship and what happens when Estraven is ostracized and he is no longer part of the high, the powers to be. And yeah, I'm not going, if you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil it. It's not your typical sci-fi. I know people who started this book and were really disappointed and struggling to get through it because they expected kind of the sci-fi that you would have, I don't know, Becky Chambers or something. This is not how Ursula Le Guin writes sci-fi. She writes about themes that are very topical, that are universal, and in order to get the message across without being preachy and without being, finger wagging, she sets that all in the future or on a different planet and with aliens to make the point more, maybe more universal, or maybe it's just that was her thing to do, how she wrote. But I think Ursula Le Guin, for me, it's literary fiction, by the way. It's not genre fiction, but I yeah, I don't like this distinction anyway, but it is the way she tackles certain issues, and in this particular, it's hailed as a feminist novel because the people on this planet are sex neutral. They are neither male nor female, and when they are ready to have sex and children, then a gender or sex is chosen, and they can be male with one partner, and 5 years later they want to have another child and they are female. So it's that aspect is why a lot of feminists like this book. But it's not even the most, I mean, it talks about gender and how we approach gender and sex for sure, but it's also this idea of how we can understand a culture that is completely different, and can we be observers if we are the UN, or are we then at a certain point lose our objectivity, and is that bad or good? And the friendship between two people who are very, very different and who misunderstand each other. So all that is in the book, and that's why I absolutely love it. It was not that easy, by the way, to pick a Le Guin, in terms of there are more Le Guins that I really love. The name for world is forest, comes to mind, but I picked this one. And then there is a classic that I reread now, and that is not that long ago because it was published in 2017, and that is Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. I read the Odyssey in various translations when I was younger. In the German translation, not in verse, but then in a sort of novel form, kind of. I read it in verse. I read various English translations, and nothing really worked for me until this one. This is just absolutely brilliant. The way she captures, for me at least, the atmosphere and the story and the time and the people, and makes them feel alive, and is not shying away from using the word slave when it's about women who are in various translations are called servants, but they're actually slaves. She keeps the verse in the same rhythm, or a similar rhythm for our culture as the original verse rhythm was in the Greek. There are the same number of lines, which also makes her have her translation be to the point. So if you have a Greek word, she explains that in her notes. If you have a Greek word and you could have 4 different English translations, a lot of translators then just use all 4. And she says, no, this is one word. I want to keep the number of lines. And so I'm going to choose one. It's really, really novel for me. And she's now working on the Iliad. So I hope that will come out soon, because that is the other one it just never really grabbed me the way I think it should. And this translation did. So if you're struggling with classics, especially with something like the Odyssey, give Emily Wilson's translation a try. It's definitely worth it. And the final book of the 5, my favorites of all time, the ones I reread the most, or have reread the most the last couple of years, 10 years, is Octavia Butler's Dawn, the first book in the Exogenesis series, or the Lilith Brood series. The other 2 are good, but this is brilliant. Published in 1987. Octavia Butler obviously doesn't need an introduction. And again, for me, this is not genre fiction. It is sci-fi. It is set in the future when we've finally completely messed up the earth, and aliens came and they rescued a couple of people, and they restored the earth. And then after quite some time, some of the people are woken up again, and that's when the story starts. So this is Lilith wakes up from a deep sleep. She finds herself aboard a vast spaceship, haunted by confused memories of a nuclear war that ravaged the world. So she is held by the Oankali, that's the alien species, and they are quite, for us humans, at least that's how Butler describes it, quite gross. And then how the relationship develops between the humans who are rescued and what the Oankali want in return. This is a book about race, but different. And that's why I think it's brilliant. It's about the question of how you can cooperate with your oppressor, how we define race and what we think is normal, quote unquote. It's just a very political book, but again, without the finger wagging and the message hitting you over the head with the message board, It's just a fantastic story, but it also has a really important message. And it's the third encounter, the close encounter of the third kind, the first encounter with aliens, but in a way that I have never read before or after. So this is just a really, really brilliant book. Anyway, those were the 5 books that I picked to be my favorite books of all time, in parentheses, meaning that I'm rereading them the most the last 10 years, parentheses closed. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments about maybe books that you consider your favorites, or how you decide which book is your favorite. Looking forward to all the other comments as well, of course. And I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.